Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the American Public Human Service Association and Progress webinar, How a Business Rules Engine Turned a High-Profile Failure into a High-Profile Success. Your host for today's event is Rick Friedman. Rick, you now have the floor.
Thank you, and welcome, everybody. We are delighted to have the opportunity to present today on a topic of, I think, significant interest relative to business rules engines, what they are, how in one particular situation with the state of Maryland, there was a really high, visibly important rollout of their health exchange. They're one of the very early adopters under the Affordable Care Act. Unfortunately, they ran into some problems, and after a significant amount of work, they were able to turn it around. And so today's presentation is really about all of that. This webinar is one of a series that APHSA is putting on. There's another one this Friday at 2:30 Eastern on modular procurement. And it's not only APHSA but PCG that will be talking about modular procurement. With regard to today's discussion on business rules, we're very fortunate to have the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange CIO, Subi Musanami, discussing what went on from the state's perspective. At the same time, we also have Dr. Mark Allen from Progress Corticon, the developer of Corticon and the rules engine, which turns out to have been very significant in the turnaround. Let me turn it over to our first speaker, Subi, if you would take it from here.
Thank you, Rick. Good afternoon, everyone on the call. I am Subi Munisamy, CIO, Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, and I was instrumental in the successful implementation of the HICS platform in 2014 after the initial failure, and now I am responsible to oversee the entire operations and any enhancements. And for this group, I also played an integral part in the implementation of other social service programs such as Medicaid, TANF, SNAP, CHIP, etc. for the state of New Hampshire as well as for Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Today I am going to talk a little bit about the history of the Maryland Exchange and what role the Corticon rules engine is playing in our platform and some of our upcoming initiatives, what we already planned for next year or so. With that said, this slide basically represents exactly like what are the various things happened in the past couple of years with respect to the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange. The first time the exchange was launched on 10/1/2013, and we did not have a successful implementation, and we have some kind of technological challenges during that time. Due to the technological challenges we faced, there was a change in the leadership in the December 2013, and under the supervision of the new leadership, an assessment was done on the system for the sustainability and longevity. And a few options were presented to the Maryland leaders like governors and other staff members. Some of the options include, going to the federal marketplace or rebuild the system from the scratch or transfer a successful solution from other exchanges. During the March of 2014, the options were reviewed by the leadership team and a decision was made to transfer the Connecticut solution to Maryland. As a result, Maryland hired Deloitte for the technology implementation and successfully completed the transfer within 7 months period of time, focused on the critical functionality for the second open enrollment. So this is the high-level background and history of this exchange. Yeah. Currently, while transferring the solution, the entire team was fully focused on the critical functionalities to meet the second open enrollment to make sure we are successfully able to enroll the Marylanders. But right after the successful implementation, we have moved on to significant improvement to the platform. This slide shows that some of the implementation what we did on 2015, the streamlined application for the Medicaid and QHP population. Initially, while we are rebuilding the system, doing the Connecticut transfer solution, we have not focused on any of the data migration from the old system, including the Medicaid population. But as and when we moved on to the next year, as and when people come and started doing renewals, they started catching up in the new system. So that is how we converted all the Medicaid population into our system. And in the second year, we are focused on some of the back-end process, such as the EDA carrier transactions and Medicaid transactions, the 1095A form for the QHP population, and 1095B form for the Medicaid population as well. We are successfully able to generate over 1 million 1095Bs and A's together during that year. And also we implemented the automated renewals for the Medicaid and QHP in 2015. This year, we have implemented the dental renewals and the full-featured mobile platform into our system. Next, I want to quickly touch on our HBX architecture and how various parts have played some integral role into the system. By seeing this picture, you can see for whatever the point of entry, the Marylanders can come into the system through consumer portal or calling the call center or worker portal or using their mobile applications. For all these point of entry, the rules are in one place, and that is the unique rule which serve all point of entry to maintain the integrity of the eligibility determination in the system, as well as this will help maintainability for the long run. Rather than rules are scattered around multiple places, here Corticon Rules Engine plays a very integral part to determine eligibility for various populations. This year, as we discussed, as I mentioned before, we have implemented the full-blown mobile application. Using the mobile also, Marylanders can create an account, application, determine eligibility, and do a plan shopping and complete the enrollment. In addition to that, they can, of course, view the notices, emails, and also upload the documents. We have implemented before the open enrollment, and this is available both English and Spanish in the mobile as well. So far, a lot of people are very actively using the mobile, and we can see as of this morning, over 44,000 individuals downloaded the mobile application. That includes both Apple and Android. Close to 20,000 people uploaded the document, and I can see like there are over like close to 10,000 people determine eligibility using the mobile and successfully done some enrollment as well after plan shopping. That population was close to 6,000. And this year has been a really good year, and today is one of the peak day in our open enrollment, and from the Corticon Rules Engine and all the other server perspective, things are going very well. This slide, I just want to mention that how modularized all the rules we have built, which can be transported for other states or other agencies if required. So this gives you just some kind of background of how many rules we have built into the Corticon rules engine for each one of the categories. We do have 20 different Medicaid categories in Maryland. While we are transferring the solution from Connecticut, we are able to easily transfer it because it's a file-based asset and it really helps a lot to customize some additional features to meet the Maryland need. The close to 75% of the rules which were already authored or developed for Connecticut was able to reuse for Maryland. And additionally, we did some customization to meet some additional requirements for the state of Maryland. So that helped very well, and we are able to successfully implement within that 7 months period of time. For Medicaid category, there are close to 1,200 rules. For QHP, 1,000 rules. The APTC CSR calculation, again, 1,000 rules. For the dental, it's a standalone dental implementation. People can come and buy only dental, or they can purchase dental along with their Medicaid or QHP plans. And we do have a separate rule for the enrollment, which is like 500 rules. This is how we are fully modularized. If you have to transport any of those rules, very well and easily able to transport. Okay. This slide just to give you some kind of idea of how many eligibility determination for the active population. See, what I put here is the 1.2 million Marylanders were very active in our system. So over 1 million active determination has been done for Medicaid and 100,000 for QHP with the APTC, 50,000 is for without APTC, and dental is 33,000. So this is the active population only I demonstrated. When I say active population, probably we might have determined at least 3 times the eligibility for the same population. So from the rules engine perspective, it's determined eligibility as served for like close to at least 3 to 4 million people. I just want to highlight some of the operational advantage of using Corticon. Right now, the usability, as we discussed before, it is very easy to develop and deploy. And I cannot underestimate, but there are some complex rules which involve in determining eligibility for some TANF and some Medicare categories, need some kind of skill set, but overall, it is kind of like easy to author and deploy. There are some key features such as the testing and integrity check capabilities gives the rule author the ability to develop and extensively test as part of the development process itself. So this saves a significant time in the testing as well as mitigate any bugs or issues after deploying into production. So I can tell you with my experience, while we deployed this into production in Pennsylvania, after production, the number of bugs or anything we identified in Corticon Rules Engine is very, very, very minimal. And in Maryland is the same case. Maryland also, after our deployment, as such, any bugs or any problems we identify in production in the rules engine perspective is very, very minimal because of this kind of capability available to do some kind of total regression testing as well as some independent unit testing to make sure whenever you do some changes to the rules, it is not breaking any of already built-in and tested rules. So that is really a cool feature available in Corticon, which we were able to leverage very well. And from the performance perspective, in the last couple of years, we have been closely monitoring how the servers of the Corticon are behaving. And I can very well say that it is very less percentage utilization on the CPU when 2,000 concurrent users were online. So server is really performing very well, and performance is really good. All right. Our future plans, we are in the process of upgrading to a newer version of Corticon. That is, I believe it is a 5.5.2. And we already established the platform, and we are planning to use more extensively within this agency, as well as we are in discussion with our parent agency, the DHR, to extend this Corticon, and we are working towards that. Recently, and also I want to point out something, recently we upgraded from IBM WAS, the underlying platform, to the JBoss open source solution. And using that, during that migration, we found the Corticon migration was very easy. Just reinstall under the JBoss, it really works like a piece of cake, and it worked very well. And in future, we are planning to move to the cloud as well, and it's the same thing I'm anticipating while we are moving to cloud. All right.
Subi?
Yes.
This is Rick. I just wanted to say that I appreciate it very much, the presentation. We'll hold questions for everybody until the end. And let me turn it over now to Mark Allen at Progress Corticon. Mark?
Thank you, Rick. I think Subi had one more slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's very quick. Just, I want to mention to this group that we received a APHSA ISM award last year for the Collaboration Across Boundary Award. And this is in recognition of reusing the entire system, which has been built once for Connecticut and reused for the Maryland. For that, there is a good recognition done by APHSA. Thank you for that. With that said, I'm handing it over to Mr. Mark Allen, Progress Corticon.
Thank you so much, Subi. I just want to say, really on behalf of the entire Corticon team, that we really appreciate you speaking on our behalf and everything positive. It really makes us so happy when our customers are successful. So thank you so much. I wanted to talk just a little bit about what makes Corticon different and really what a rules engine is and why it's so important for these projects. Just really briefly on my background, I am the general manager of Corticon and also a complementary product line called Rolebase. So Corticon is the rules engine, and Rolebase is a complete application development platform. So you can build complete systems such as eligibility systems or benefits exchange systems on the combination of products. So I was formerly the founder of Corticon, dating all the way back to 2000, and ran it as CEO until we sold Corticon to Progress. And so now I run both product lines inside of Progress. So we'll jump right in. So what exactly is a rules engine? So it's a software to help make the decisions within a business application and make them for a business the right time and with business agility. So it's not fixed if you use a rules engine. You can always change the rules that govern your decisions. So what are some examples of decisions? Is this citizen eligible for health care benefits? What type of benefits? What levels apply? What discounts apply in terms of pricing? Those are examples. Now, decisions are governed by rules. Those rules may come from regulations, defined at the level of the federal government. They may come from regulations defined at the state level, or they may come from policies and practices, because usually those regulations have ambiguities in them. They haven't defined everything logically what to do. So there are additional decisions that need to be made about how to make a decision that really come from the implementers themselves and the subject matter experts, let me be clear, that understand these decisions and the rules. So a rules engine, also called a business rules management system, is a component of software that allows you to extract this type of logic from the rest of the application and manage it independently in tools that are purposed for managing this type of logic, and server technology that's purposed for scaling this type of logic. So you can make changes now to the rules independent of the rest of the system and expose a lot of the changes to subject matter experts themselves. So another huge advantage of separating out the rules engine is when the rules engine makes the decision for you, as opposed to people or as opposed to embedded code, it can also provide an audit trail telling you exactly what rules fired in what order. So you can always go back and understand why we made a particular decision. You can also have multiple different versions of decisions, services as we call them, being executed simultaneously. So for example, if you want to apply rules based upon a certain effective date, you can do that. So what's the problem? Why did we create Corticon? Why are we in business? Automating rules is hard because rules interact with one another in complex ways. You get effectively a network effect. So if you have 10 rules in your system, that's an easy problem. Really, any programmer can implement that type of logic. But when you have 100 rules in your system, it's not 10 times more difficult. It's 100 or 1,000 times more difficult because you make one change to the rule and it can impact any other rules in your system. You have to understand those interrelationships to be able to safely make changes to your system. Now, as we know, rules have to be changed from a variety of different sources. Regulations change. We need to make complicated changes to rules. I mean, the Affordable Care Act regulations were so significant that they forced a rewrite of Medicaid eligibility systems across the nation. Lots of other reasons for changes, new business policies, competition in certain industries, market shifts, responding to fraud, all these require changes to the rules. And if you're using traditional development, then a change that can be described to business people, sometimes in a matter of minutes. I've experienced this personally, why I built Corticon, and many of our customers have experienced it. We can describe maybe in 10 minutes what the change is, but we go to the IT department, and due to the complexity, the interrelationships of the logic, that change, which business thinks is simple, maybe takes man-months and millions of dollars to change. Again, the more rules there are in the system, the more expensive it is to change, growing exponentially. So there's really a better way, which is to use a rules engine. So what are the keys to an effective rules engine? So first of all is separating the decision logic from the rest of the application, okay, and empowering business users to manage that logic. And what's really key here, this is really what's different about Corticon compared to other rules engines. So every rules engine in the market separates the logic, the rules logic from the rest of the application. And every business rules engine provides some way for business users to manage the logic. But complex logic has to be managed by programmers. So it's only Corticon that allows all logic, from the most simple to the most complex, to be managed in a simple spreadsheet-like environment. So the second piece here is to ensure safe, fast changes and ensure the integrity of the rules. So this concept is very similar to the concept of referential data integrity in a database. Without referential data integrity, it's easy to get garbage data into a database. Without referential rule integrity, it's easy to get garbage rule into the rule base. And Subi mentioned this as a benefit, the ability to test and understand the logical errors of your rules up front as a key benefit and unique to Corticon. So next is the ability to expose rules as standards-based services, whether these are REST services or XML SOAP services or Java services or .NET services. The ability to expose the same rules in different ways as standards-based services is really key requirement, especially if you're going to be transferring rules from state to state that have different architectures, or you want to use the same rules across multiple applications like Subi is doing, Maryland is doing, for example, the mobile and web applications. So I'm going to summarize these points of differentiation. So first of all, the easiest to use, as I mentioned, this model-driven development, automating all of the rules, not just the simple rules without code. So ensuring reliability, effectively guaranteeing the integrity of the rules. Ensuring performance and scalability even for the most complex and data-intensive rules, and ensuring portability of those rules across platforms. So literally you can take rules from Maryland and go and deploy them into another architecture, whether it's .NET, whether it's Java, whether it's some new architecture to be developed in the future. So let's talk about each of these individually. So model-driven development. So here is the traditional approach, whether you are coding your rules or whether you're using alternative rules engines. So the business specifies these rules. So most of these rules come from regulation in this case. And then we need technical resources to effectively design. What are we going to put in business user interfaces and what are we going to code? And then we need to do testing of the rule, integration, deployment, which require deep technical skills. So Corticon changes this paradigm and allows all the specification, design, and implementation of the logic to be done as what we call rules modeling. So in a spreadsheet-like tool, very easy, can be managed by really subject matter experts. Now, the reality of our user base, say about half of our users come from a traditional IT application development and coding background, and half of them have no background and experience in coding at all. They're business analysts or subject matter experts. And even if the application developers are actually managing the rules, they can sit down with the subject matter experts and show them the rules in a form that they can understand. So this is really key for communication, really key for speed, really key for assuring integrity and understanding the interrelationships of the rules, and really key for testing and just generally accelerating the process. So this is from a customer of ours. The NCAA uses, it's also an eligibility determination. It's eligibility for athletes to play collegiate sport. And there are a variety of different criteria, academic criteria, professionalism. Academics is actually quite complicated. I mean, similar degree of complexity to Medicaid eligibility in the rules that I've seen. And they did an analysis where they were using a first-generation rules technology, and they moved over to Corticon because it just couldn't scale to handle the complexity as they got to thousands of rules. So what they found was somebody brand new, just been trained in Corticon, 10 times faster to do an initial implementation of a given decision service, and 25 times faster to make a change to that service. This is what model-driven development enables. So next point is identifying logical errors during the requirements phase. Now this is a screenshot, just comes from standard software development methodology textbooks. This shows is the cost to fix an error grows exponentially as you move down your development phase. As you move from requirements to design to coding to unit testing, user acceptance testing, ultimately production. The longer it takes to find that error, the more expensive it is to fix. Now we also know that most errors are introduced in bad requirements. As I mentioned, you get a regulation from the federal government. That regulation is not in a formal logic. It's in English. It has ambiguity in it. It has incompleteness in it. So it has logical errors specified in that document. Not specified, but there are logical errors that you have to find in order to get this right. Now, most development approaches, you don't find those errors until you go out to testing and user acceptance testing if they require business judgment to understand those errors. And God forbid you don't find an error until you go into production. I have some interesting stories about that. Customers of ours been in production with logical errors for years. And not knowing it until they migrated over to Corticon and analyzed the logic. Now, what Corticon enables you to do is to identify those errors in the initial business specification of the logic and dramatically accelerate the process and improve the quality of the system. So with that, I want to open up to questions.
This is Rick, and it looks like we've got one question that someone typed in. The question is, I understand the HIX solution implemented in Maryland's highly modularized. Are there any state approaches Maryland used to port the solution to their state, given that most of the state exchanges are deprived on funding? So I guess the question is, could you expand upon Maryland's approach in terms of the transfer from Connecticut? Subi?
Yes. Sorry, I was so far, no state approached, but I hear from various other people, they are in discussion with the CMS or within other states that what is the feasibility of doing this kind of transport again. So we are very much open in case if somebody is approaching us, we will work with the respective state and do whatever is required to be done to help them out to build their exchange.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to throw in also that I know that with rules-based engines, there's a 90% match available from CMS for Medicaid programs in order to implement them and purchase them. I think the extent that many of the people online also work with human service agencies, the A87 exception would allow you to take advantage of that to the extent that your own Medicaid agency is involved with rules engines. So I think the funding aspects of it are there until at least the A87 exception expires. We had another question, and Mark, I think this is for you. How is the Corticon rules engine different from an Oracle-based rule engine?
Sure, happy to take that one on. So the points that I mentioned are equally applicable to the Oracle rules engines. There are a couple of Oracle rules engines that we're aware of. There's one in their middleware stack, which is a pretty technical rules engine. There's another rules engine, Oracle Policy Automation, which is typically what is sold to the public sector as part of eligibility solutions. So there are two different approaches, but it's a very similar set of differentiation. So, let me actually note that the Oracle Policy Automation is very natural language based. So it looks really cool, but it's a structured natural language. So it's not like it's the regulation replaced. So you have to restructure the regulation into its natural language form. Now, the problem is that natural language form, while it looks really good, it's not easy to put all of your rules there. So there's a lot of your rules that you just can't put there at all. So you have to put them into a programming language. So the same thing, it's not a natural language approach, but the middleware rules engine and many other rules engines have business tooling, and it's the same problem. So the business tooling supports a subset of the logic that would, for example, be in the regulation itself. And so a lot of the rest of the logic needs to go into a programming language. Now, in addition to this making the implementation, the expression of the logic from the regulation, let's say, into something that you can automate far more challenging, far more difficult, require people of different skills. Now, in addition to that, you have the most serious problem of all, which I'm going to address another question here, which was how does Corticon help to identify the logical errors in the requirements phase as opposed to the user acceptance testing phase and later on? So what Corticon does, because all rules in Corticon all go into one common metaphor, and it's a spreadsheet-like metaphor. We call it a rule sheet. It's an extension of something called a decision table. Now, many products offer decision tables, but Corticon is the only one that offers comprehensive decision tables where all logic can be put into that form. Now, when we put all the logic in that form, so all the logic of a given decision, we can click on buttons that highlight the errors in the logic, how the rules conflict, whether there are any incomplete scenarios, whether there's circular logic in the rules. So the Corticon tool highlights those errors automatically for you. So this is really different. Now compare that if you don't have your rules in a common metaphor, and you have some of your rules in a business tool and some of your rules in a programming language, how do you identify the interrelationships? Well, the answer is it's hard. There are different profiling tools and techniques, but you typically get to debugging and testing techniques in order to identify those errors. Because in Corticon they're in a common metaphor, we can highlight directly against that metaphor where the errors are in ways that the subject matter experts can understand and very early in the development life cycle.
Mark, there was another question. I think this is also for you. Can you talk about how Corticon's rule engine could handle a rather complex rule as opposed to a more simplified rule?
Yeah, so complexity really comes from a couple of different factors, mostly from the complexity of the object model or data model. So if you have a flat data model, you have just a customer and fields on that customer. You can handle that in any rules engine in any business tool, okay? But when you have a real-world data model that has complex associated data with many one-to-many and many-to-many relationships, so you have a customer who places many orders, and each order can have line items, and the line items can have products. An applicant, and the applicant can have many family members that could have different income that could apply. When you get into that kind of logic, that's where the other rule engines break down in their business tools. Hopefully that helps you to understand. There are other measures of complexity and the ability to handle, let's say, different types of calculations, being able to address different operations on data, things like that, that are important measures as well. But I would say it's the complexity of the data model is really the biggest area where the products you see differentiation.
That makes a lot of sense. Subi, I have a question for you. This certainly wasn't easy, even with a rules engine that worked as well as this one did. So I'm curious about what sorts of skills the Maryland staff needed to have in order to implement this solution. I'm sure the morale was down in the very low. And how does one take an organization, given the high publicity and all of that in terms of the failure, and turn it around and focus on the skills that are needed when you bring in and transfer a new solution like this? And I've got the same question for Mark once you're finished.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, as you said, the morale was very low, but it is a different type of team, and everyone knows like it is a very high visible project, and there is absolutely no option for failure in the second time. So with that kind of pressure, the team is kind of like a A team, and they are able to totally focus on this rules engine. And as Mark mentioned before, there are certain features also available in this Corticon, which helps us drive all possible combination of rules required to determine any eligibility. So these are the various things we have focused and get this done. From the skill perspective, in order to write some complex rules, we need some specific skill set as well. So there are some couple of people who have been fully trained and they are totally focused on what is these rules and what is the effort required to take care of these rules. And also while we are doing a transfer solution, the basic architecture of the rules is already built in Connecticut. That also helps us a lot. And we are able to do some kind of re-engineering of what is that and do some customization effort to meet the Maryland need. So all these kind of some niche skilled people along with the already constructed architecture of the rules engine, we are able to successfully develop to meet the Maryland need in the second time. I hope this answers your question.
Sure does. Mark?
Yeah, so we have now done several, I'd say, rescue projects. We did a recent project at Oracle, which they had issues in putting into production, Oregon, issues putting into production the Oracle rules engine there. And I think that Subi's absolutely right. So you're coming into a place that there's morale problems. What we do is we really help to show why, some reasons why these projects fail. Okay, and I discuss these with you. So, you know, these reasons that you get way down the process and you still have errors in your rules. And the more rules you have, the harder it is to find where those errors are. So, when people start to nod their heads and begin to see, wow, I can be successful. So I think that's the role that we can play as a vendor. Now, the other thing is we provide training, mentoring, and certification services. So as Subi mentioned, it's very easy for new people to get ramped up on Corticon. We provide a 3-day training course for people. The only prerequisite is you know how to use a keyboard and a mouse. So no programming background and skills required. That said, it's still a specialized skill. So you really become proficient by practicing that skill. So we also typically offer mentoring services as well to help people and guide them along the way. And then as people begin to do their projects and gain those skills, we offer a certification process to take an exam and get your credentials. So we have hundreds of certified resources available in many of the leading system integrator organizations to really help our customers along the way.
Super. Just getting back to the human services programs, I'm wondering about Maryland in terms of how far along you are in your thinking in terms of leveraging what you already have, in terms of rules engines helping you in terms of either eligibility or other areas in the human services area. Subi?
Yes, Mark. Right now, we did a proposal and we submitted a APD to CMS, and we are waiting for the approval. Other than that, we are in tight communication with the DHR, the HHS agency, and once the approval comes, we will be in a full-blown to start the project to integrate some of these rules engine features, as well as we will be able to extend this rules engine for some of the non-major Medicaid, TANF, food stamps, and childcare, child welfare eligibility systems.
Okay.
So
and Mark,
yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah. I keep stepping on you. Go ahead.
No, I think I'm giving more gap between my statement. So within a couple of months, we'll come to know exactly like how fast and furious we'll be starting it.
Okay. And Mark, your experience relative to working with human service agencies, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've had quite a bit of experience, really, I guess it's about a decade that we've been working now in health and human services agencies. Our first customer was the state of Pennsylvania, so predating the Affordable Care Act, as part of a modernization of their eligibility determination, running mostly on the mainframe at that point in time. And they have since deployed quite broadly and across, modernize all their eligibility determination across all programs, effectively doing integrated eligibility, using Corticon for a whole variety of other purposes in a variety of other departments. The success there, again, has led to great career success of a lot of the folks there. The former CTO of the Health and Human Services Department, Jim Weaver, is now the CTO of the entire state. Based upon the success across a number of different departments, they're now requiring new projects in other departments to use the Corticon rules engine, such as the Department of DMV. So now that was the first of now 27 different states that are using the Corticon rules engine. The majority of those are health and human services projects, but we are starting to see more and more projects in other departments as well.
Super. Okay, looks like we have one more question that just came in. So there is the question, will a copy of the webinar be available for download? And the answer to that is yes, it will be on the APHSA site. I don't want to belabor this, but I think it's been a really interesting conversation.
Rick, I see another question I wanted to get to there. That is a question about, would the Corticon rules engine work on an Oracle-based platform and with the Siebel case management system?
Right.
So the answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, the Corticon rules engine can also be called by legacy systems. So I mentioned that's one of the real key advantages is this to be able to call the rules as open standards-based services. So all the modern application development platforms allow you to call as standards-based services, so SOAP or REST services. You can even use Enterprise COBOL and call services out from that. So yes, absolutely, we can work very well with lots of different systems, including Oracle.
Great, thanks, Mark, for that catching that. So just in wrapping this up, any final comments, Subi?
No, thank you. And it is a great pleasure to share our lessons learned from various implementation and what we did in Maryland. Thank you for all the listeners.
And I think people's hats are off to Maryland for turning it around and doing such a terrific job. Mark, any closing remarks?
Just want to say thank you all very much for your time. Thank you so much, Subi, again for speaking. Thank you, Rick, for hosting. And please feel free to reach out to us. Hopefully we have the chance to work with you soon. Thank you.
Very good, folks. Thank you for your time today. And that does it for today's call. Bye-bye.
I'd like to thank all our presenters today for presenting, and you, the participants, for joining today's webinar. This concludes today's webinar presented by the American Public Human Services Association and Progress. Thanks again for attending, and have a great day.